What's up, everybody? It's an interesting day here. It's Friday. We're a little earlier than our normal stream. We'll probably be a little shorter than our normal stream. I was trying to figure out what direction to go with this video. Thought about talking more about Scott Peterson, but we'll probably save that for next week. There are some interesting things going out there. Some people involved in the case actually reached out to me. I won't go into too many details about that, but I found that to be pretty interesting and learned some new things there. So we do have more to discuss in that case, but I'll save it for next week because I really felt like there was just way too much Brian Kohberger talk happening right now for what feels like no legitimate reason. So I wanted to update on some stuff we haven't taken a look at yet, which is the Gonsalves family, their thoughts and what they knew about the grand jury proceeding, about the indictment, about the arraignment, and about the death penalty, because those are all legal things happening in this case, and we get the victim's reaction. A lot of those things the victims can take part in or can be a part of. What did they know? What did they not know? So we're going to go through that. We're going to learn some stuff there. Some of you have probably already seen some of these interviews, but I'll be watching them with you, and we'll be discussing kind of what people are saying. And Shannon Gray is on one of the interviews, so we'll see if he actually says anything, or if not, because of the gag order, or what he says based on the gag order. So we'll discuss that together. And then I think for the first time in this world since we've been discussing Brian Kohberger, I'm going to do something I've never done before, and that is go through the chat actually looking for speculative theories, for the speculation that's out there. I don't care where you saw it, read it, heard it. You all legitimately have some questions, and that's fair game for you to have those questions. And while we don't promote the speculation on this channel, I do think it's important to recognize and realize that it exists. And I'll just tell you how I deal with it and how I think about it and how I look at it as a lawyer, and why, what makes something different, what makes something speculation versus a legitimate piece of even potential evidence or something that's potentially relevant. So we will get into some of that today because so many of you had so many different questions. I did a reel on Instagram, hitting one of them. We can talk about that as well. But all that, and of course, answering your other questions, is what's on tap for today's live. That, and I was going to do a little channel update, which I'm not going to do anymore. Some things that are changing, schedules, different, kind of things we have coming and on the horizon. That'll be fun. But stick till the end if you are a member, because there's a member update and some more stuff to happen there. The member discount code is also something we're going to talk about at the end of the video after we finish all the law stuff. So members, stick around till the end. But everybody else, even if you don't want to become a member, it's free to subscribe and like the video. So please do that so that we can just continue to grow the community here and the people that come in and discuss this stuff and have questions and might not know a lawyer, be able to ask a lawyer these questions or watch these cases with a lawyer, and they might want to do that with us. So if they do, that would be cool. All right. So the first video we're going to watch is, and we're just going to kind of take the one that was recorded first, talking about the grand jury and the indictment. We're going to start there, and then we'll get to the arraignment and death penalty. It's kind of two separate videos. So let's start with, what did the victims' families know about the grand jury proceeding, about the indictment? It was secret. Were they involved? What do they know? Let's take a listen together.
Just check in with you and ask how you're holding up.
There's been progress, and that always helps. I feel like we have a mission, we have a job to do, we have things that have to happen. And when I see those things happening, that helps me understand that we're going in the right direction. And that's always better than just sitting and waiting for who knows what's going to happen.
So when the official news dropped that the grand jury had convened, the process had completed, the indictment was coming down, what was your reaction?
They had let us know beforehand that this process was in action and it was going to possibly happen. They kind of put it in a vague circumstance saying it could be this case, but we knew. I have a legal counsel. I talked to my legal counsel. He said, yes, it's definitely this case.
So they let them know, meaning the state let the victims' families know that this is something that could be happening in this case. And he has a lawyer, Shannon Gray. We know, we've seen him on this channel before. We've seen him do interviews. And he said he talked to his legal counsel and they basically said that is the case. It is going to be a grand jury proceeding here. So they knew it was coming. They were aware, even though it wasn't very specific.
So we knew that this was a possibility. So we just sat back, hoped that everybody was going to remain quiet and it wouldn't leak, because the last thing we wanted was any of the families to be accused of that. So then we
so again, they are very cognizant of the gag order. When they found out something like this, they didn't want to let it leak because they really only told the victims' families, apparently. And so if it would have leaked, the accusations would have come back on the victims' families. And again, I promise you, they're having discussions about the gag order and saying, we cannot do this. We cannot do that. We cannot let anything leak. The gag order will just get tighter, not looser, if that's what we do. So it was very important. They made sure it didn't leak. And it really didn't leak until, it was happening or had happened with the grand jury proceedings and the indictment. So kudos to the victims' families, to their counsels for keeping a lid on all this stuff to show that you should be able to share this information with the victims and it not get leaked out. I don't think the victims are the ones leaking things. I think if they're doing it like this publicly for everybody to see when they have something to say, which is totally appropriate. But I don't think they're the ones secretly leaking stuff to news stations in this case.
Kept our mouth shut and we just waited for it to happen. And then they told us, yeah, it's over. It's done.
Well, we had been making big plans, as a network, decamping to Idaho for the June 26th hearing. It was my understanding there was going to be a solid 3 to 5 days, like a mini trial, and we would have learned a lot of information. I wanted to get your take, however, on the fact that we will not get that opportunity to learn some of these mysterious holes in this case. Is it troublesome to you? Is it bothersome to you? Or are you just happy that the process is continuing regardless of what kind of indictment we got?
No, I'm just like everyone else. I want to know exactly what's going on. I want to see all the evidence. I don't like the secretivity, like the hiding of it. But I understand why they did it. There's people who are witnesses and they need to be protected and they don't need to be dragged through every obstacle that this process.
I have a feeling some of the speculation, some of the questions you all are going to have are going to be centered around some of the victims, some of the witnesses, their involvement. What do they know? And we'll talk about that later, but that's why he's saying legitimately he understands why there's a gag order in place to protect them, even though he doesn't like the secretive nature of all this and he wants to see all the evidence and wants it to all be public.
Process goes through, and it was a wise decision to go this path. So all the information will come out, but it doesn't have to come out in multiple times in multiple ways, and we don't have to make them go through this exercise more than needed.
Thank you for watching. Go to news.
All right, and then now we will get to the discussion about the arraignment and death penalty. And before we really jump into the death penalty, and here's Shannon Gray, we'll see if he says anything. One of the things with the death penalty here, and the question a lot of people have is, does the state have to involve the victims? Do the victims get the final say? What are the victims saying in this case? Well, you're going to hear from Mr. Gonsalves. There's another victim that has come out and said they want the death penalty. The state will take it under advisement. Certain states say the state has to consider what the victims say, but in every state that I'm aware of, in every jurisdiction, federal or state, the state or the prosecutor has the decision-making power as to whether or not they are going to seek the death penalty, regardless of what the victims want. They should not disregard it, but it can be outweighed by other factors. Usually, if they seek the death penalty, they're very confident in the case because the death penalty makes it more difficult. There are more rules and more rights of the defendant if there's death penalty. The jury selection process is different. The trial process is much longer. It's like 2 trials in most jurisdictions. So it is a very different process if they do seek the death penalty. So that is a consideration that the prosecutor has to, a decision they have to make when weighing all of the information they get. And one big piece of information is the victims and their families, but it doesn't necessarily mean that is the deciding factor. So I want that to be clear as well.
this time for joining me tonight. I know that this has been just a hell of a day, not just for you, but 25 family members with you. Can you give me your reaction to what you saw transpire just feet away from you in that courtroom today?
It felt good to get some progress. We've been delayed as long as they could possibly delay us. I'm ready. I'm ready for this to go on and lay out the case and let the community see what the evidence is. And then, let the cards fly where they're going to go. There's been a lot of weird processes, things that were done in a way that are there to help everybody and help the witnesses, the surviving witnesses. But I'm just ready for the normal court process and normal justice, and just get back to what, we kind of learned in school. And that's what I want to see. I want to see just lay it out, transparency. Everybody gets to see what, their evidence is, what our evidence is. And then we let the jury members decide what's going to be real.
Steve, it's been almost 5 months since the defendant walked into that same courtroom, almost looking the same, sat in the same seat beside the same lawyer, and you were there. Did it feel any different? Are things falling into place more differently now as you lay your eyes upon him today, knowing how much more you know now than you knew back then?
Well, I know he wants to be an active participant in the process, so that kind of changes it for me. Before, he was just somebody that was dragged into a court that was probably surprised to be there. Now he's an active participant, and to me, it's I'm a competitive person, so I'm like, all right, it's on. It's us versus them, and we're gonna lay this evidence out, and we're gonna go from there.
And that's kind of when somebody is accused and arrested and charged, it very much becomes an us versus them, and you cannot blame the victims. And that's where he's feeling right now. Like, we're going to go get him. He wants to be an active participant. I'm a competitive guy. Let's do it. Let's see who wins. It's us against them. And again, the presumption of innocence, I don't blame any victim for struggling with the presumption of innocence. Okay. So I'm not going to say the Gonsalves family has to, presume him innocent also. I know they've said that, and I think that they are doing their best to try that, but you have to understand, this is the person that everybody's saying they have all this evidence that did this to their beautiful daughters. So I understand putting them aside for a second as far as how we look at this situation. I just want people to understand how difficult it is for people that are accused or charged with crimes. It becomes an us versus them mentality publicly and with more than just the victims' families. And that's the stuff we have to understand and remember as we go through this process. And again, I want to be as clear as possible. I don't blame Mr. Gonsalves one bit for anything he's saying. I would feel the same way he does. You can't imagine how he's feeling, but I don't blame him one bit for what he said. I just think it's a good illustration of what it feels like to be accused of a crime, because everybody that's accused is not guilty, and everybody that's accused does not end up getting convicted. And that's important to remember.
How was Christy today, and Olivia? And Olivia brought Kaylee's baby niece with her. How did they do today? How did they get through it?
The girls struggle. The girls have a harder time with it. And, it takes weeks for us to just talk it through and maybe watch a couple movies, do a couple different things, like some family gatherings. The girls are very much, I don't let this guy mess with my emotions, but the girls, that's just the way it is, and I don't fight it. I just understand that they have a different way of processing pain and this anguish. So then we just work together and support them. And, it's just one day at a time. And some days are tougher than others, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Makes sense. There are 60 days from now in which the state has to make its intentions known if they're going to seek the death penalty. I know the state hasn't shared a lot with you, and Shannon has been very upfront about the fact this has been very difficult working within this gag order. But have the victims' advocates within the state at least shared with you that this is an intention of theirs to seek the death penalty in this case?
We're working with members of the government in Idaho. We're trying to establish that you just can't hunt our babies. You just can't come to our state and hurt our people. It's just
So what he means by that is you just can't hunt our babies. You just can't come to our state and hurt our people. Is that we need to send a message. If something heinous like this happens, we need to seek the death penalty. That's what he means here in making statements like that. It's clear to me that he and his family want the death penalty. Another victim's family wants the death penalty. So that's going to be on the state's desk, and they're going to have to make that decision knowing that this is what the victim wants and knowing that they are going to very publicly make comments like this. And if they don't seek the death penalty, I think they are going to publicly be disappointed in that decision by the state, which is absolutely their prerogative and fine. But again, and we've talked about this on, I talked about it with JD when he was on recently. He was a state attorney. We talked about it with my dad. We talked about it with other people, including myself, that have worked at the state attorney's office. There is a lot of political pressure. We just heard it in the Scott Peterson case, a lot of political pressure and a lot of public pressure in a lot of these cases that can affect decisions made by prosecutors. So we will see, but I think the pressure is coming hard at the state attorney's office for the death penalty in this case.
It's unacceptable. We're a small state, but you're going to see how strong we are and how big we are when you mess with us. And we're going to
put us versus them.
Our foot down, and we're going to show the world, we hate all the bad things that are happening, but here in Idaho, we can control one thing, and you just can't hunt our babies down. That's just too much. It's just too much. We can't sit here and say, there was 5 victims or 6 victims or 7 victims. Then you go for the death penalty. No, it's been crossed. The line's been crossed, and we're going to go there.
Do you feel as though the state has conferred with you appropriately on your wishes for a death penalty? And do you feel like that is a direction they might be going?
I'm just one family, and they've made that very clear. What you want, Steve, is just what you want. I'm trying to organize different families so we have one united voice, but that's not easy. But that's what we're working towards. And I know there's other families that feel like I do, but we don't want to get too washed up in the revenge factor. We want to remember these girls. We want to remember Ethan, and we want to make sure that when this is all said and done, that's the only people you think of. We want the defendant to just disappear, and all we remember is the beautiful lives that these people had. And then that's the best that we can do. All this media, all the stuff we're doing is so what we remember the victims and we forget who did this crime, which is very uncommon. Normally we just talk about the person who does this crime. We'd like to turn that on its head, forget about him, and just remember these beautiful people, these beautiful young souls.
Thank you for watching.
So they're going to push hard for the death penalty. They want to remember the victims, not the defendant. And they think one of the ways that you can aid in that is with the death penalty. So that brings us kind of up to speed on what the Gonsalves family thinks and feels. Also gives an indication of what Shannon Gray thinks about that gag order. I don't think he said one word in that interview that I saw, at least. And again, because he believes, and it hasn't been clarified otherwise, that he is subject to that gag order, but the victims and their families can speak about the case. And that's exactly what happened. And that's one of the clarifications or changes he's asking, is for himself to be able to speak on behalf of the family as well. So as it sits right now, over the last couple of weeks, those 2 interviews were done, I think, over the last 2 weeks. And he didn't say anything in either one of them. We saw him in the second one, but I think that's just an interesting point to make. Okay. So yes, we've got over 3,000 people in the chat here on this kind of different time of a live. So hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe to our channel so that you can be a part of the conversation when we discuss the legal angles of these cases. And that's what we're going to try to do, is apply some legal principles and angles to some of the speculative theories that have come out. I'm going to start with one that was sent to me on Instagram. There's 3 or 4 I have here that a bunch of you asked on Instagram. One is a couple that we've hit already on short videos just to get us started. Number one is that he is connected with the Pennsylvania missing persons because his parents were called to testify at a grand jury. That exploded. Okay. He's done this before. That's a huge speculative theory. The Dateline show, he went and he broke into somebody else's house, put cameras up in a room. So I will say, from what I've seen, I would file motions in limine on all of that because, number one, the Stroud area regional police department came out and said there is no evidence that Dana Smithers' disappearance in any way is tied to Idaho suspect Brian Kohberger. So not only do you not have evidence to even make that argument, there's evidence to the contrary. Number two, there's been no criminal complaints made about him breaking into that woman's house or setting up security cameras. No proof that I've seen other than law enforcement thinks that he could have accessed her cameras if he knew her Wi-Fi password, assuming she didn't change it, assuming he got close enough, assuming that's what he was doing, and assuming he wasn't just a friend that helped her set up security cameras. I have a friend that helps me set up all my crap like that. So he could be spying on me and my family if he wanted to, I guess. But it's like there's no evidence that he actually did that. Just because somebody has the means to do something does not mean you can argue that they did. And that's going to be something we apply to all of these theories. You can't, as a lawyer, argue in court a theory or a factual scenario without a good faith basis. Now, there's some argument that where you can get and what arguments you can get to based on the facts you have. Sometimes there's some gray areas there, but generally I can't just say that, and I'll just use Tori because I know she won't be offended. I can't just say, Tori uses a computer obviously to watch this, so she must be spying on everybody. So everybody that ever has a stalking claim or something like that, Tori did it. And I'm going to argue she did it because she has a computer. It's like, no, you have to have more evidence than that. You have to actually show Tori's been in her IP address is connected to that Wi-Fi while it was connected to the cameras. You actually have to have a good faith basis and facts that actually connect that stuff, which is why most of these theories are not going to jive and are not going to come out in court. But some of them are still a possibility we have to learn more about. One thing is that there had to be a co-defendant. Okay. And this is one that I think has arguments on both sides. Number one, we haven't really seen any evidence that there is a co-defendant, but there were reports that he stated, has anybody else been arrested or any other arrests made? Number one. Number two, there are people that I think legitimately look at this and think one person could not have committed this heinous or physical crime in this amount of time, so there must have been two people. That's a possibility. I think that that's a possibility, but they would need evidence of that before they could testify to it. And sometimes an expert can testify to how long it took him. There was a Rittenhouse expert that testified like how you would move the gun and how you would move around and physically whether you could do this or that and the timing of it and reaction time. If you had somebody like that testify, that might be evidence to make you argue there was two people. Murdoch, same thing. There was arguments that there were two people because there were two guns, so they could make that argument. You see how they have facts to connect that. Now, Kohberger cannot be required to testify and let them know that there's some co-defendant. He can if he wants to make a deal, but he can't be required. So those are some of the questions I got on Instagram. I've got a couple more if it slows down here in the chat, but I want to get to the questions you all have. Thank you, Azam, for the super sticker. All right. Good vibe, Stacy. I think Ethan's parents know something. Somebody else said, why is Ethan's family being treated or acting differently, keeping some of his stuff? So there are some questions that Ethan or DM were involved. Okay. And again, the only way to do this is for none of you to be offended if I disagree with your speculation. That's the whole point, is that we're asking questions. And I know Good Vibes Stacy's going to keep it good vibes, but I haven't seen any evidence of that. I have heard people thinking things like that. And I think most of that comes from the gaps in evidence and what we don't know, the unknown. I think if there was no gag order, we would not be even thinking about some of these gaps because we would see exactly what they have. And if they had something on Ethan or on one of the other victims, then that might be out there without the gag order. But I think speculation about other victims or witnesses being involved at this point, I have seen literally nothing that I think could be used in court to show that they were involved. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, by the way. Question: what did Steve Gonsalves mean when he said he didn't have to go up the stairs? He thinks Kaylee was the target. What does he mean? I think he means that the only reason to go up to the third floor was to target the victims on the third floor. If he just wanted the other victims, he wouldn't have had to go that far. Clueless Clausy. Jessica Reed Krause's article on her Substack has blown up talking about the possibility of the King Road house being a drug hub. Okay, so there's a couple other ones with this. Claudia. I've heard speculation about a drug traffic related assassination. Is there any others? Mercy Cat, you can't just be a drug dealer and think you're safe in your house at night either. Let me see if there are any more about the drugs. So that's all the ones I've seen about drugs. So this is a very interesting one because people are going to talk about this. And I will say data at the state attorney's office, when you talk about the gang crimes unit, which I worked in at the state attorney's office for a little bit, they're just kind of observed and assisted on some of those cases. But the person that led that unit, who's now a judge, she would explain to us, and what we had these meetings, once a month to discuss this stuff. And she walked us through that the high 90th percentile of cases where there are break-ins and crimes and fatalities happen in houses where there are either large amounts of drugs, cash, or weapons. So those three things. So while this seems like a guy going after girls and things like that, the fact that it could be drug related, I think statistically there's a possibility, but we have no evidence of that. So the statistics alone would not allow you to make that argument. But if something came out that they were intoxicated or under the influence when the cops showed up, if they said in the interviews that that's why they didn't call the cops, we've heard a lot about this delay of calling 911. If it had to do with drugs or alcohol, but more likely drugs, then potentially the defense starts getting the dots that they want to connect to show that this was drug related. If you remember, same thing happened in Alex Murdaugh's case. They literally tried to argue that the drug cartel came and did these hits, but they had evidence that would at least reasonably suggest that before they made that argument. And sometimes they were still objected to and the judge kept some of it out. Like they couldn't go too far because they couldn't say it was for non-payment. Judge Newman did not allow that in because there was no evidence that there was lack of payment to the drug dealer. So you can't just make up motives for crimes for drug dealers. You can say it could be a drug-related offense if there was drugs around and things like that. You might be able to make that argument, but not because non-payment, not because they knew they stashed a bunch of drugs there or it was a drug trafficking or something like that. You would need more evidence to make those arguments to make them not just pure speculation. Lil Patty, Peter, is it normal procedure to inform victims ahead of time in pending grand jury indictment? From time to time, and usually they do it like they did. They don't actually tell them because it's secret, but they infer or they get the inference and the victims pick up on what they're putting down. Tori, I think the only speculation I can think of is that he delivered to that address and perhaps that girl saw him and thought it was him she saw in the house. So other speculation kind of connected with this is the DoorDash guy versus this guy or versus Brian Kohberger. And again, I am positive they looked into the DoorDash guy or gal. I don't remember if we knew it was a guy to see if he had an alibi, if it wasn't him and things like that. So I think there's going to be more coming out about this, but as it sits right now, I'm not sure. And Tori said, thank you for using me in your analogy. You have my permission always. Thank you, Tori. Yeah, I can understand why people would get offended for me using them, but it's clearly an example. I try to make that clear up front, and I'll pick on the people I know welcome it, like Tori. So thank you, Tori. All right, what else we got here? Marquetta, 3,000 plus in the chat. Hit that like button. Happy Friday. Weekend coming on strong. Peter, do you think the prosecution will seek the death penalty or seek a deal to make sure that he gets his punishment and not risk it like what happened in the Parkland trial for the families where they lived? So where they were livid. So the families will be even more livid if they offer him a deal, I think. Because Parkland, what the jury ended up deciding for the Parkland shooter is the deal they would offer Brian Kohberger without even trying to get the death penalty. I think the parents would prefer them try to get the death penalty. I think the state will seek the death penalty in this case. I think if they don't, that will be telling. And I would like to know why, and I would try to dig in to why they don't seek the death penalty if they don't. I think they will. If for nothing else, then it does leave the door open for a deal where he just admits guilt, answers questions that the victims have, and spends the rest of his life in prison. I'm not saying that's what they want, but it at least opens that possibility. Sneakers McGee, super thrilled to have hit alive, still at the office though. So trying to keep up. Keep on keeping on. All right. Mama Pink, what of the rumor that one of the girls thought she had a stalker? Did she report it? Was there an investigation? Got my Nothing Burger sweatshirt. That's one of my favorite designs, is the Nothing Burgers on the merch site. So I think that the stalker, the social media stuff, who followed who, whether or not he DM'd them, how and why he DM'd them, if he knew if he was the stalker or if they investigated it and found out it was somebody else. I'd be interested to hear more about this. But what I'm going to say about this one, instead of just calling it speculation, I want to know what evidence they have. This is stuff that I actually think we have heard some leaks of evidence that they could have evidence of. And that's what I'm more interested in seeing. Nicole said Tori is guilty. Hey, if with friends like us, right? Me making accusations, you calling her guilty, who needs enemies? Speaking of Tori, I feel like the death penalty is in play. Sorry, if the death penalty is in play, there should be a high standard met during trials. Is it? Yes. There are more protections, more rules in place. There is no higher standard than beyond a reasonable doubt, but they not only have to prove the case, they also have to prove that it's appropriate for the death penalty, and no mitigating factors are set in place to make it not the death penalty. The Nicholas Cruz trial is a great example of that, and how exactly that worked, whether people agree with the outcome or not. Claudia, what if BK had an acute psychotic episode during it all? Is it odd? It is odd to me to not have the possibility of an insanity plea. So Claudia, while there's not a pure not guilty by reason of insanity like we have in Florida, they do have a mental health capacity defense or aspect to their defense in Idaho. For instance, if you cannot form the proper mental state or mental criminal mens rea or culpability, then you could be found not guilty. We did a whole breakdown on this in the Lori Vallow case because these same things came up in Idaho and we looked at all the laws and the rules. But if you believe that you are just, if I believe that I'm just taking this highlighter cap out and putting it back in over and over again, and I can prove that that's what I believe I'm doing, and I left and was like, I have no idea what happened, then I did not find I did not have the mental capacity to actually commit the crime, because I didn't know I was taking a knife out and putting it into another person, causing them to die. So those are the kind of arguments, and we give some specific examples from case law and other videos, but there is a mental insanity capacity to a defense, but you have to notify the state if you intend to use it, and you intend to call doctors and explain that. So he would have to notify the state if he is planning on doing that, and he hasn't done that yet. April Diaz, are lawyers allowed to see the crime scene before it's released to the families? Before it's released to the family. So you mean, like, if there's evidence, then the defense lawyers are entitled to see that evidence, review that evidence that's going to be used against their client. If it's a car and it's not just given back to the defense. But when you say a crime scene, I'm not sure, like the house given back to the family. This is a really case by case basis. But if it's evidence that's going to be used against the criminal defendant, he has a right to review that evidence, see that evidence, test that evidence. Again, like we saw in the Murdoch case. Hiroshima. Why are the survivors considered victims? They are not family nor have survived injuries. Why there is a victim's rights notification form for DM on documents court, and there is not for BF. I don't know why there is for one of them and not the other, but you can still be victims of an assault without getting touched. You can be victims of being subjected to experiencing that, even if you don't have any physical injuries. There can be obviously mental distress as a result of the crimes committed. So they can be considered victims in some statutes. And again, this same thing was argued in Lori Vallow's case, where we talked about whether Kay Woodcock should be considered a victim. And they thought Kay should, but Larry shouldn't, I think, unless I have that backwards. So there actually is analysis in Idaho how to determine whether somebody's a victim or not. And I think the survivors that were in the house that night would fall under the definition of victims, according to Idaho case law. Be kind. I think it's a double-edged sword. If they go for the death penalty, it keeps the trial going on forever, right? Not on forever, but it does potentially delay or extend. It doesn't delay, but it extends the timing for the trial for sure. Rosie, off topic. I would love to know your favorite case precedent, or like one you cite a lot. So there are a lot of ones that we cite in PI cases that protect our clients and don't allow insurance companies to invade the privacy of our clients. There's some case precedent that doesn't allow them to consider insurance because they don't know what kind of insurance is there because of the non-joinder statute in Florida. And you are supposed to sit there and think this nice old lady is just, we're suing her for millions of dollars, when in reality it's an insurance company with $1 million policy. And that's what we're going for, but they make it seem like, we're trying to hurt this lady. So there are things like that that happen in trials that we cite cases all the time. But there's a lot. If I had more time to think about it, I could probably come up with some good examples for you. Good vibes. Stacy's always bringing the good vibes. Cammy, my theory, BK showed up there while the crime was happening. Interesting. I assume he would testify to that then and try to provide some proof. I think there's a lot of, I will just tell you, I think here's another reason I think there's so much speculation, is I think there are a lot of different scenarios at this point that would be very believable. And that's one of the issues with the gag order too, is people don't know what to believe and they're searching for the truth. Everybody's looking for different reasons, but I try to keep it with what I think you can at least have some connection to make an argument for with some of these speculative theories. Brenda, question. Brian had his defense saying expiatory evidence. I think exculpatory evidence. Shouldn't it have come out last time in court? So no, exculpatory evidence does not mean proof of innocence. It means something that could suggest he didn't do it, or it could suggest he didn't do it, or could potentially prove his innocence based on the lawyer's arguments for the defense. If there is actually a video of somebody else committing the crime, the prosecutors have a duty to dismiss these charges and charge somebody else. So there are different kind of levels of exculpatory evidence. April Diaz, sorry, I meant, can lawyers go to the crime scene while it's new and not in pics? So yes, lawyers can go to crime scenes. Sometimes they have to ask the judge. Sometimes they may agree with the other person. Sometimes they may have an expert show up. But yes, they can go to crime scenes very early on. Usually the state and the detectives and law enforcement and the crime scene investigators, they're the ones first on scene and they get to do, their stuff first. And then defense lawyers get to come later, obviously, once somebody's arrested and charged. But they're not involved as early in the case usually. Somebody asked, what was one trial you'd like to go back and live stream and watch it? Is definitely OJ. From what I'm thinking, I mean, that had some charismatic lawyers, celebrity client, horrible facts and details, and then a not guilty surprising verdict at the end, sequestered jury. I mean, a very wild set of circumstances. It's really not close to me. That would be the one. Kelly, I am still hung up on the timeline for this case. It doesn't add up for me for one man to do this, but that's just me. Love your channel. Thank you, Kelly. And I think that this is one of the things that's going to be investigated and potentially argued. And that's why, just like in the Murdaugh case, they pointed all the fingers at him as the state said he did this on his own. So they felt like if they could prove it was two people, maybe he would be not guilty. And Kohberger's team might do something similar. It had to be more than one person. It wasn't Kohberger. It was a set of two. You guys have the wrong guy. You're missing a pair of killers. They could make some similar argument. Now, it didn't work for Murdaugh. We'll see if it works for Kohberger if they decide to do it. Elise, thank you so much for the super sticker. All right, I'm going to answer a couple more questions, and then we're just going to get to our member update, and we'll be done for the weekend. Belinda, why did the defense want Bethany to come testify? They said she had exculpatory evidence. What if she had a prior relationship or friendship with BK? Just a thought. Maybe would explain his cell phone pings in the area. I love this question, Belinda, for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've answered your own question, right? They wanted to talk to her because she had information that they thought could be useful for them. But you also did another good thing by giving an example of exculpatory evidence that does not necessarily prove Brian Kohberger is innocent, right? It could absolutely be exculpatory and explain the connection, explain the phone pings, explain why his DNA might be there if he frequented that house, if he dated Bethany, if they were friends, if they knew each other, if he tutored her, whatever it may be. If he has some other explanation of why he's in the house, it can aid in his defense. Now, he could be her friend. He could have been in that house in the past. His DNA could have been in the house. He could have had a very legitimate reason for being in the house, and he still could have committed these crimes. So it could be exculpatory. It not necessarily is exculpatory, but I think that's important because that's exactly one of the reasons why they want to talk to Bethany Funkel. What did she know? And we don't have the answers yet, but we'll get them one day. Great question. Joanne, thank you for the super chat. Darlene, there have been reports that the house will be demolished. Will the court have any say in that? So yes, the court could give a court order to stop that. I think the lawyers and the parties will be involved in making that decision. And I think the court will give everybody ample opportunity to inspect it, do testing, whatever they want to do at the crime scene before it's demolished. Now, if Brian Kohberger wants to do a jury view, or if the state wants to do a jury view, they would file a motion with the court saying, don't let this happen, judge. Block this. Don't let them do it. Now, it could be causing a financial strain, financial burden, emotional distress, things like that. But as you saw in Parkland, there's going to be a jury view in the Scott Peterson case. There was a jury view in the Nicholas Cruz trial. So that is still pretty much intact for the jury to view it, as horrible as that is, and as much money as that costs. So it's not an automatic thing that it's going to be demolished. So we'll have to wait and see. A stay of demolition. Okay. That's all we've got. Hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe to our page if you haven't already. I am just going to give a quick member update. So some of you have been asking about the merch discount, and we have posted the merch discount code in the community page for the level, which I think is the higher level that gets the merch discount. So that merch discount is going to be good for the month of June. On July 1st, we are going to roll out a completely new set of memberships with different levels. There will still be the 2 levels that are involved. There'll be a couple higher levels because we're going to do more with the members. We are going to add more merch discounts for higher levels to more pieces of merchandise. We are going to add quarterly Zoom chats where we can actually get together, hang out, talk through things, potentially watch something together, because there's been a lot of talk about, watching the Dateline NBC show together, watching the Uhtred movie together. Maybe that's something we can work in potentially with that group of members. We have other stuff that is in the works that we'll do a full breakdown, a full explanation, so you can know what you're getting into, regardless if you decide to become a member, which nobody has to become a member. This is just fun stuff we're adding for us, just being thankful for you guys supporting the channel, always being around, making this community what it is, making it educational, making it enjoyable to be a part of, and making me want to keep coming back for more. So I appreciate that. Tori, I think the fact that the house was a party house could be used to explain a lot of his evidence. And I think that is going to happen. Okay. So yeah. So we're going to have fun stuff. And I know there are going to be people that are looking forward to that. I know there are going to be people probably mad about it, but we're looking for things to add. The channel is growing. We're looking for things to continue to add value, and make it enjoyable for you all to be around here. So I appreciate that. And I love everybody that is subscribed and that gets in the chat and that follows us on Instagram and Twitter and gets in the DMs. We learn so much from you all. We find out so much content from you all. You guys drive the content, what we talk about, when we talk about it, how we talk about it. So I always appreciate that no matter what. Don't ever feel like you have to do anything you don't want to do on this channel. I'm pumped to have you here every time you decide to show up, get in the chat, get in the comments, hit that like button, whatever it is you do. I appreciate it. Until next time, I hope everybody enjoys their weekend. I'm out at a conference next week, so the schedule is going to be a little wacky, but we will be doing videos. I will do a couple lives while we're there. We'll do some reels and some shorts. So if you don't follow us on Instagram and Twitter and you want to see those reels, give us a follow on there. Rosie, welcome to the membership crew and to all the new members today that have joined. So yeah, so just hit that reminder bell because you never know when we're going to go live next week because of this conference. But I appreciate you all. Until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know.